order. We begin with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
There is a correction on this. Mark Wilson was not absent.
Okay, I move we accept the corrected minutes.
I'll second it.
Those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Agenda?
Can you please speak up?
Can't hear you back there.
What?
We can't hear you.
Under new business,
Okay. State that. One change.
one change to the agenda, under new business, we'll strike the, accept the resignation of the zoning code enforcement officer.
Okay, so that's, was that change to the agenda? Those are, motion, is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second to approve the corrected agenda. Those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Carried. Next item is the public meeting on the moratorium, and I'm going to go over the rules as we see it tonight. In a public hearing, and you have a copy of this was made available to you at the door. There are two objectives of a public hearing.
Vibrating on the chair.
Is that better? Yeah. Okay. Can't see my smiling face now. So there's two objectives of a public hearing. Definition given by New York Conference of Mayors Handbook. And one of the first is to ensure that the public body, the Village Board of Trustees charged with taking action on a particular issue, is fully aware of the public sentiment about the proposed action. And secondly, to give the public an opportunity to voice their concerns, opposition, or support for the proposed action, and to bolster the public's confidence in the public body's decision. So coming with that are some responsibilities of those speaking also from this handbook. For efficiency and to ensure all voices are heard, resident and non-resident, there's no discrimination. There is a time limit of 3 minutes per speaker to summarize your opinion. Please limit comments to the topic at hand, which is the proposed short-term rental moratorium and wording changes also proposed by the Zoning Revision Committee. All comments and opinions are to be directed to the village board and not back and forth with other presenters. There will be only one opportunity to speak, and a second person is not allowed to use the remainder of the 3 minutes allotted to the speaker. When speaking, please stand if you are able and state your name and address for the record. A public hearing does not require a stenographer, so for accuracy, please provide comments in writing also if you want to be sure that of the accuracy. Members of the board do not have to answer questions or give analysis at a public hearing, although they may do so. So when everyone has had an opportunity to speak, we'll close the public hearing and move on to our regular business agenda. Who would like to begin?
Well, I think, before you open the public comment, okay, so I think You may say.
Please use the microphone.
Can't hear you.
Before you start the public hearing with the public comments, I think it's important to lay down exactly what is being discussed, right? So I think that'll help expedite the conversations and narrow the issues, okay? So, as you know, right now in front of the board is a proposed moratorium law that was introduced 2 meetings ago. That moratorium, if it were to go into law, would allow for the moratorium to be in place, and the design of that is allow the zoning committee to continue doing its due diligence and putting together what they believe to be the appropriate zoning changes that ultimately will come before this board and will be subject to multiple public meetings and public hearings before those zoning provisions, if they get enacted, and what they are, right? And that will deal with not only short-term moratorium on rentals, but everything that is being updated by the zoning committee that they've been working diligently on for over a year at this point. So I think it'd be prudent before you even go further into the dialogue, right, to try to get a handle on when you anticipate that public hearing and those committee proposals coming before the board, right? There's a good possibility that we're going through this exercise and the committee could present their changes to the zoning law, because I believe they said they were saving this for last, in 2 months, and you'll be right back at this again when you actually have the actual law in front of you. So we actually don't even know if it would, any change to the short-term rentals will last the entire 6 months, because if there's a law before that, it would supersede the moratorium, right? So doesn't it make sense at many levels to kind of get a time frame as to when that issue is going to be put front and center again? Because the way I look at it is, if the law doesn't take effect until the filing with New York State, which if you approve it now, it's probably going to be at least 3 weeks before they file it, and you get it back. And theoretically speaking, you're going to be back here 3 weeks after that and have a whole nother meeting with respect to the laws that are proposed. So again, if they say it's going to be 6 months before you get it, it's a different conversation than if they say you're going to get it in now or a month or more. Has there been any indication as to when you expect those to be coming before you guys for further review?
Please provide your name and title and credentials. I don't know who you are. Please inform us.
So I'm the attorney for the Village of Cassadaga, Joe Kellner.
Speaking to the microphone.
Thank you.
So it's up to you guys. I mean, it just makes sense to get that information, right? If you're dealing with a scenario where all of this is going to be for 6 weeks versus 6 months, it could be a different point of conversation for all the audience. So I think that's important.
It is important. Yes, I think it's important. The question, I don't know how easily that is answered, because there's been a lot of work done by the committee, and it's taken a lot of time to get to this point. I don't know if I can pin down a time frame.
That's all I'm figuring out.
Unless, does the committee want to volunteer a time frame? I would be suspicious you wouldn't want to do that.
I'll speak on behalf of the committee. Brian Bergen, co-chair of the committee. We don't have a firm time frame, unfortunately, because there are variables out there. And there's some unknowns, and depending on what type of research that we get into and how deep. So we'd hate to commit to a firm timeline. I would like to say, for our sake, late fall being able to propose something, but I could easily see this going into winter. And we had a soft timeline of the year end to have everything submitted. But that's in terms of all zoning that we've done inclusive. But once again, we don't have a firm timeline on it.
Okay.
I think it was important at least to bring it up. So the last thing you want to know is when we're all done with this, then you're going to be back here in 2 weeks.
Right. Okay. So who would like to begin? State your name, please.
Good evening. My name is Rudy Eversole. I live at 43 Putnam Road. I've lived there for nearly 50 years of my 61 years of existence. I have never, ever witnessed what I'm witnessing now by this board of elected representatives. I have a letter that I'm going to read, but I'm also going to open with, any of you watched Yellowstone? Beth, we might be the tornado, and there may be a trailer court in this room. So, with that said, dear Mayor Dorman, I'm going to be very direct with my points this evening. Prior to the July 13th trustee meeting, legal language was written and made available to the zoning committee members, the village board, with a motion was made and ratified to enact a moratorium on short-term rentals. That's the reason we're here tonight. I believe I'm correct in stating the language never was presented to village residents prior to this aggressive action. It was not publicly discussed until the 15th zoning committee meeting, when several members of the zoning committee stated they opposed the language that was of the moratorium in local law 1/2022. Trustee Flaherty, who also sits on the zoning committee, stated clearly she was unhappy with the language, yet she seconded that motion to enact it 2 nights prior. Is this how our government is being run in this village? Are we in Albany or Washington, D.C.? I'm not a lawyer, and I don't pretend to be one, but I was on that board, sitting right where you were several years ago. I can guarantee you, none of the garbage that you put out on the 15th or the 13th would have ever made it beyond that board. I have researched some very interesting information, and from my heart, I believe misjustice is happening by reading our current zoning code and discovering this article, Article 18, New York State General Municipal Law. The state conflicts of interest for municipal officials. Article 18. Is any of you board members, are any of you board members familiar with Article 18 of the Municipal Code? Shame on you. Article 18 of New York General Municipal Law, the state conflicts of interest for local municipalities. Article 18 provides regulating conflicts of interest for municipal officers and employees. It applies to all municipalities in the state except New York City. Municipality can be broadly defined, including town and county improvement districts. It can also include board and commission members.
All right, that's time.
You gonna let me finish? Please, Mayor? Please? I'm
Why
asking.
not treat everybody the same,
I
so
will.
can you summarize in the next?
I'll summarize it real quickly. At your December 9th meeting of 2020, Mr. Wilson was appointed Chairman of Buildings and Grounds. At the VDOT meeting, October 27th of 2021, Mr. Wilson requested permission to have athletes park at the ball fields to alleviate problems on Park Avenue. Resolution 152, made by A-Stride, seconded by Krupa, allowing athletes to park at the ball field. 3 ayes, 0 nays, 1 abstained. Mr. Wilson abstained, which he's supposed to do, but did he get preferential treatment because he's the zoning, or he's on the village board? Conflict of interest. Every minute of his time on the board is dedicated to Wilson Endurance Sports. That's all that is ever mentioned in the minutes.
We're way off topic.
We're moving off the topic.
I'll get back on it. Mr. Wade,
Okay, so,
I'll present you with this letter. You can have this letter as your record. Who wants to come and get it?
so also just want to make clear, because there's a couple of things. At the last meeting, this board did not vote to approve the short moratorium law. So I just want to make sure that's clear from everyone's perspective.
The only thing they voted on was to introduce it. You introduce a law, and the next follow-up is for a public hearing. So this is the process being undertaken tonight. You guys are not bound to approve a law because you approved to have it be introduced, right? So you could actually have exceptions to the law, vote for it to be introduced because you want to facilitate the dialogue and hear the public's opinion. So nothing that you did at the last meeting bound you to approve the law, even if you approved the language. All you did was introduce it, which now brings it before this public hearing, and then ultimately a vote. So, going back and what I talked to the mayor about, if you want to make substantive changes to the law that was introduced, you have a right to do that. It would require a new introduction and new public hearing. If there's typographic errors or non-material or ministerial issues, then you can go forward. So, all the whole process is unplain in of itself, right? You did not commit to anything. All you did was introduce it, which the next step is to invite the public to comment, which is exactly what happened.
So I'm glad to hear you instructing and educating the board on the process of enacting or proposing a local law. From my perspective, this should have happened weeks or months ago. Mark Wilson didn't know at the last village board meeting that he'd be voting on a local law. Cindy Flaherty had said at the last meeting that there would be revisions before this public hearing, without knowing evidently that that wouldn't be possible before this hearing. She also thought earlier today it would be necessary to have a public hearing before the proposed law could even be tabled. Certainly it could be tabled, it could be removed, this public hearing could have been canceled. But our board members didn't know, and that's your responsibility to instruct them, and I think that you served our community very poorly in that regard. It's also very clear that a number of people on the zoning committee and on the village board are unhappy with the wording of this law. There's no reason why this village should be proceeding with a hearing, which is the next step, as you just said, to voting on a law, when so many people in our local government, from the committee to the board, aren't happy with this law. We shouldn't have this hearing at all. This should have been canceled completely until the proposed law was revised in consideration of the zoning committee's recommendations, our village board members' concerns and recommendations, and the concerns the entire village has brought forward to the board. We shouldn't be here. And again, I think that's partly your responsibility, and I think you failed our community in that regard as well, for not educating our board sooner on this topic, and bringing all of us here this evening, when I'm sure there's other things we'd rather be doing, not to mention the grief so many of us have experienced as a result of this proposed law. And I won't get into all of that, but many people in this room have contacted me personally regarding their grief, and my personal thanks to many people who have reached out with support for the grief that I've been experiencing. But again, we shouldn't have to go through all of this. We shouldn't be here. And if it's not clear already, I am certainly not in favor of the moratorium, certainly not as it's written, and I feel that the cart is way before the horse with this particular issue.
I'm not nearly as eloquent as Sean. And I'll show my better half to most of you. This letter is from my sister. She lives in Texas. She grew up here. Lived here all her life until she got married and moved. They say the Blue Oar a couple years ago, well, let's see, 5 years ago. So this is what she wanted me to say for everything. I grew up in Cassadaga, and since we moved to Texas in 1989, we have visited my mom every year. My kids are grown and live with their spouses in San Francisco and Denver. Mom died in 2016, and we decided then to visit Cassadaga as a family in 2017. I don't know if I should read it. I mean, this is more than I would have. But after a parent dies, you think of things you wish you would have asked them. I wanted to tell and show my kids fun things about growing up in Cassadaga. Swimming across the lake, which we weren't supposed to do. Walking across the lake when it was iced over, which wasn't too smart. Field boards, etc. Just this wonderful little community. It's clear that Mom wanted me to understand Cassadaga before she died. She insisted that I take a copy of the history of Cassadaga. I have a lot of good memories growing up here. There are no good hotel options close to Cassadaga, plus we wanted a homey atmosphere where we could cook and hang out. I discussed options with Kathy and she mentioned the Blue Orb. I didn't realize that Cassadaga had any rental properties, but thought it could be a fun solution. I booked the property for a week the following summer. They invited her mother-in-law and her daughter's father. It turned out to be an excellent solution. Everyone had a great time. The property had everything we needed and was a great location for what we wanted to do. I don't know if you want to know everything she did, but they just talked about all the fun stuff they did that she could show her family that we were able to do in this area. She walked down our road to show her son-in-law where we grew up. We went to the cemetery, and she mentioned she's going to be buried there, if anybody cares. It would have been difficult, nearly impossible, to have this type of experience from a hotel. We were very good tenants / citizens during our stay. I understand that Cassadaga is currently making decisions about how B&Bs fit into the village and wanted to share my experience with Blue Orb. I would stay there again and would highly recommend it. Sincerely, Sue Milligan, Templeton. So, obviously, you get what she's thinking, and just, I don't know how much time I have, but I'll just be brief, because I love everybody on every side. So, it's difficult, to pick sides, because you're all my friends and everything, but I have to say that I agree that there should not be a moratorium. I feel like this all should be, let the committee do their thing, and bottom line, and, figure out if this is really what we need. And then at that time, if that's what's going to happen, it's going to happen. But for now, I don't feel it should go on. And I have enjoyed B&Bs throughout the country that I've gone to, that I've loved. And had they not been available, you go to Motel 6. We'll leave the light
on. I'm Steve Whitmark. I live at 39 Pettit Place. It would just seem helpful if somebody could describe or define what the moratorium is. I think there's some misunderstanding. People think that what's being proposed is a ban on short-term rentals. I don't believe that's what the case is. I don't think people really understand what the proposal is, and if somebody could explain it here, maybe shorten up some of the discussion.
So the New York State allows for certain municipalities to enact certain laws and moratoriums. What they're essentially saying is, hey, we don't have this figured out yet. We're afraid that if we do not act a moratorium before we address our zoning law or our code to address these issues, that there could be irreparable damage. So what we would like to do is just put a hold for up to 6 months to a year to allow us to have a better control on what to do. The purpose of the moratorium really is to then have your governing body, in this case the zoning board and ultimately the town board, and propose a rule as to relates to short-term rentals. So essentially the moratorium is to put a hold or a stopgap in place while they get it. It's very popular right now in the solar industry because a lot of zoning codes don't have zoning codes for solar systems and solar fields. So they're adopting moratoriums so then they can go back and address how they want to address that in their zoning code. That's what's being applied here. There are a number of municipalities that have short-term moratoriums on short-term rentals right now because of the impacts on the communities, and that was what was proposed by the committee, was to do a 6-month moratorium to allow them time to address how they want to propose zoning changes to address short-term rentals, and then that would come before the vote. So if it went into law, it would be essentially a 6-month pause on no new moratoriums. Those who were here last month, the current version as drafted, there is a grandfathering provision that would allow current short-term rentals to continue during that 6 months, but no new short-term rentals would be allowed for the 6 months until they come up with a new law.
6 months to a year and a half.
Yeah.
540 days.
540 days.
I'm pretty sure the one we wrote was only 6 months.
No, it says 540 days.
You wrote it, you don't know it?
You're a lawyer?
I don't know.
That's
All right, I'll go.
Stand up.
Okay. Can I go? Shh. Okay. I'm Kim Collins. I'm a vacation property owner from the Blue Oar, and I'm also a part-time resident in Cassadaga. As my neighbors and friends can attest, I am in Cassadaga all the time. I spend most of the late fall, winter, and early spring living in Blue Oar. So, and I love Cassadaga. But I am actually going to use my 3 minutes to read a letter from a woman who could not be here today. Multi-generational family, the Watermans. Many of you probably know who they are. So this is Tricia Waterman-Verhoost. She wrote, Mayor Dorman and village trustees, this is Tricia, Waterman-Verhoost. I would like to state that my father and my relatives have been rooted in the Cassadaga area for generations. My great aunt purchased the land and built her home here. When she passed away, my father purchased her home. It has been in our family ever since. At the time that my parents took ownership, I was about 11 years old. This became our summer home where my parents, my brother, and I spent many wonderful times together. My aunts and uncles and cousins lived in Cassadaga year-round, so during the summer months, we had plenty of family around. My cousins, my brother, and I all learned how to water ski on Cassadaga Lake. I had my first serious crush in Cassadaga. We have so many treasured memories from our time spent in Cassadaga. During the school season, my parents rented the property out to a school teacher, which worked out perfectly. It allowed my parents the needed income to keep our family home and our family. Eventually, my parents moved to Cassadaga permanently. In 2015, my mother passed away. And in 2020, my father passed away at the age of 92. He loved his home on Cassadaga Lake. My brother and I have inherited the home in this beautiful town of Cassadaga. And like my parents, the income from renting it out affords us the opportunity to keep it in our family. That is so important to us because it's what my parents wanted for us too. We hope and pray that our children would be able to continue the ownership of our homestead and be able to rent it out to help offset the cost and stay in the community should we pass. On a side note, our neighbors here in Cassadaga have not ever complained about the seasonal renters that have had the opportunity to come and enjoy Cassadaga. It's a beautiful place and its beauty should be enjoyed by anyone who would be fortunate enough to come and experience it. Sincerely, Tricia Waterman. Oh, and you gotta read that one.
No, I'm not reading. I got one.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, just bring it in, submit.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Edison. That is an own dojo.
If they've come in by mail, probably.
Let's make sure, yeah. This whole moratorium issue began with the Continental Division.
Please state who you are. So I can-
Nobody,
I'm sorry, we just state your name. So I
oh,
can-
Anita Gian, I live on Middle Lake. Nobody who was a short-term rental owner recused themselves. When I first learned of the date of the commencement of this moratorium, I felt that it was personal on the part of some of the village board, that they wanted to eliminate competition. That was my impression, and I thought it was vindictive. Why the midsummer date of August 10th? Why not January 1st, 2023? Why the big hurry when there have been no complaints? After thinking about a new law with penalties such as fines and jail time, it appears to be fascist and misogynistic. It is further eroding our rights in this country. Why do we need an oppressive law when the guidelines are fine? Let the citizens and the business benefit from the short-term rentals. That's it.
Yeah.
I have a question. My name is Rob Liederman. I'm on 36 North Main Street. I don't understand kind of all about politics is money. So I'm on Main Street. There are homes on Main Street that look just awful, that nobody is going to go and spend any money on to increase the value so that you can get more money on your taxes. The people that are going to do that is somebody that wants to get that property to be able to get $800 a week, as opposed to somebody that can just afford a home for $40,000 and still let it look like garbage. I don't understand the short-sightedness of not being able to see that your tax base will go up. A house that's $40,000, if I bought that and turned that into something that's going to draw somebody that's going to spend $3,000 a month, I don't understand the thought behind it because it's all about money. You're screwing yourselves. I don't get it. So if you can explain why you would want to do that, to have houses on Main Street look like garbage when somebody could buy them and put money into it and increase your property value.
Outside interest.
I don't know the politics of Cassadaga, so I don't understand it. I'm looking at it strictly as no politics. I don't know any of you other than...
Let's get the property value up, Rob.
Excuse me.
So,
Is your opinion for or against the
I'm against,
moratorium?
I'm against it. I don't understand why you want to do it.
Yes.
Can I add on to what Rob has said? My name is Donna House. I live at 40 North Main Street, and my husband has lived in our home for 50 years. I've been there for 38. We are homeowners. I don't own a short-term rental now, nor do I intend to in the near future, but if I ever decide to, this should be my right to do this when I want to do it.
Right on.
A moratorium would stop that. It should be decided by me, not the village board. I do not feel a moratorium is necessary or warranted. My husband and I take great care and great pride in our house. There are so many houses and yards in the village that are in varying states of disrepair and neglect, especially on Main Street. To my knowledge, most of these are homeowner occupied. A home near us needs a lot of work and will be coming up for sale very soon. My husband and I would much rather see this house purchased by someone who will fix it up and rent it rather than another owner who does not take care of their property. And if this moratorium goes into effect, who's going to take care of my neighbor's yard? Because there's a pretty good chance, like Rob said, someone who's going to buy a low-income house, as we see on Main Street all the time, chances are it is not going to be taken care of. And we've seen it in the 38 years I've lived there. I've seen that house just go downhill further and further. So we would much rather take our chances with a short-term rental than an owner that does not take care of their property.
Here.
My name is Tom Bickner. I live at 85 Maple Avenue. First, let me say that I am not opposed to all Airbnbs, although they're a business in our community, and every business in our community has zoning regulations. I'm in business, in the convenience stores, gas stations. I'm sure that if I tried to plop a gas station or a convenience store in a residential neighborhood, that wouldn't go over very well. And in terms of regulations, every business has to adhere to zoning regulations. The Airbnb business has 0 regulations. And as you can correct me if I'm wrong, this moratorium is not a proposed law at this point. It is a moratorium in order to allow our community, our village board, to put zoning regulations in place. The same as every business owner has to adhere to a regulation on their commercial business. It is a commercial business. I am not opposed to them. I think to a degree, in the right spots, in the right numbers, they're good. I would like to point a few things out. Our community, as I understand it, has now about 12 Airbnbs, which is 5 or 6 more than I realized. It's at the point where real estate values are being driven up by folks who are buying properties and their intent is to make it an Airbnb and a rental, short-term rental. First, let me say this. Young people with a family can no longer afford to buy a home in our village because the prices are being driven up so high that it's impossible for them. Look around, people. See how many young people with children currently live in our village compared to the way it was 10, 15, 20, 40 years ago. I've lived here for 40 years. We're a community. There's definitely a place for Airbnbs, but I don't want to see it unregulated and have our entire village become a village of Airbnbs. First of all, maybe it'll help the tax base. Who's going to be able to afford to live here? It's certainly not going to help families who are wanting to buy a home in a small town community like we have. So there are regulations that are necessary, not just for Airbnbs, but for every business. And that's the purpose of the zoning laws all around New York State, Cassadaga, every village. If you read the papers, how many villages and towns and cities are in the middle of lawsuits now because of Airbnb problems? hopefully, we don't get to that point in this village. Hopefully, the moratorium makes sense because it allows time to put zoning regulations in place. It's that simple. Nobody's saying you can't have an Airbnb. They're saying you need to be regulated, like every business in the community is. You can't, I can't go next to your house and plop a car repair business and stack 50 cars outside for repair, unregulated. I don't think any of you would be happy about that, whether you own an Airbnb or not. Airbnbs need to be regulated, and the whole purpose of this moratorium is to allow people to view what regulations make sense. I want to commend our village board for taking the time to look at it and think about it. I want to commend the people on the zoning committee for their patience, and people have degraded them and said nasty things about them. It's uncalled for in this village or anywhere. So, thank you all. I am for the moratorium. On the record.
Hi, I'm Sue Asquith. I live at 186 Hill Drive. I just want to comment on Tom. I think there are current codes that are on the books. It's section 602. So it's not right to say that there aren't current codes that are regulating rental properties currently today in the village. So the zoning review committee compiled what they feel are compelling reasons to push its agenda forward. Here are the cons, which is a handout here tonight. Decrease in population. This is the only comment supported, I feel, by actual data. In 1970, there were 905 residents here. I was one of them. Today, I think that figure is in the high 500s. In 52 years, we have lost less than half the population. Short-term rentals didn't really come on the scene until 10 years ago. I fail to see the connection when there have been no efforts to attract new residents. Loss of tax revenue. We can't control sales tax revenue generated statewide. It's a moving target. The only thing we do control is our own property values and generating economic activity that benefits the overall community. Loss of community. Well, what is happening here is the definition of loss of community. Nuisances. Haven't been any reported. Check with the sheriff department. If trespassing is an issue, then people should keep their kids and grandkids in their own yards. Lack of year-round local business support. If there are 12 properties total times 2 average residents per household, that equals 24 people. Businesses aren't going under over 24 people. Raises property values. I don't think anyone can say that their financial goal is to have their largest investment remain flat or lose value. Loss of contribution of community members. I gave significant notice that I couldn't do this year's Labor Day parade and was happy to turn over my files and provide ideas. Instead, I got accused of not wanting to help my village. It had nothing to do with an STR. Vacant property. So the argument here is that short-term rentals can be vacant at times. Are residents not supposed to leave our homes or travel for fear of harming our community? Running a business in a residential district, the comprehensive plan supported that. Development of home-based businesses. To understand the power to zone, one must understand the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan is the culmination of a planning process that establishes the official land use of a community and presents goals and vision for the future that guides official decision-making. The comprehensive plan includes a thorough analysis of current data showing land development trends and issues, community resources, and public needs for transportation, recreation, and housing. Zoning is merely one method for implementing the goals of the plan. Having a comprehensive plan ensures forethought and planning precede zoning and zoning amendments. These are the strict guidelines for the New York State Division of Local Government Services, zoning, and the comprehensive plan. Based on our own SurveyMonkey results, comprehensive plan responses received were off the charts statistically. People were asked what they overwhelmingly supported in terms of housing, business, tourism, recreation, image, and identity. There's not one mention of short-term rental as a weakness in the SWOT analysis. And short-term rentals were only mentioned in terms of using VRBO and Airbnb to market these properties. This issue should be moved back to the comprehensive plan. We are here tonight to address a lack of awareness that is breaking the small-town character residents are desperate to preserve. I'm hoping you're all listening.
Sue, did you want to submit that letter?
Sue,
What's that?
you want to present that letter?
Oh, I'll go at the end.
Yeah, no, real quick, anyone who has written documentation, make sure it gets up here because then it goes into an official record and earmarked by the village, so if anyone ever requested it. So if you want that written letter, whatever it is, or other people's submissions, make sure you put them in so they're part of the village record.
Yeah, I'm brand new, I can't keep up, so I'm trying.
And then also, section 602 applies to boarding houses and bed and breakfast, so it wouldn't be applicable here, but there is a provision.
And it
for
says
rentals.
in similar terms.
Yeah, but it wouldn't be here.
Why not?
Why not?
So a short-term rental is actually defined by New York State Court as something less than 30 days, but which may make sense. However, the boarding house and bed and breakfast, one, you're licensed, and two, the owner is still in the occupancy, right? If you're running a bed and breakfast, there's a manager, proprietor that's on site, same with a boarding house.
So if you rent out your room, if you're renting out beds in your house and you are bed and breakfast.
What's that?
So if you're doing an Airbnb, but it's just a room inside your house, like I think there was a lady named Pamela who mentioned this about wanting to be able to rent out a room inside of her house, then that is
I don't think there's a clear-cut answer on that, to be candid with you. I don't know if it's applicable or not. Well, I know.
You just said it was.
The boarding.
On that particular issue, I don't know.
But that is the issue though, right?
But
That's part of the issue.
all I'm saying is that that particular issue, along with the definition of short-term rentals, the legality of it, isn't throughout New York State being litigated right now. Those definitions, those terms, everything's being litigated because it's the first time that's ever become an issue, and it's not unique to Cassadaga, unique to Chautauqua County.
I'm Genevieve Monticelli, and for transparency purposes, this is my dad, Tom Beekner. I have a lot of friends in this room on both sides, and so this makes me very nervous. Like Mrs. Thorpe, I feel you, because you don't want to hurt anybody. You don't want this to be an issue I do this is me and my mom. We get emotional when we feel something, so I'm sorry. But I have children here, and so I have good friends who own Airbnbs. I have a big stake in this community. I grew up here, I was born here. And I just hate to see the community torn apart like this. I want to commend both committees and the board, because I know that this is tearing you apart personally too. I'm sorry. The purpose is to protect everybody in the community, not to have your personal interest at heart. And in my opinion, if the moratorium is for making sure that there are rules in place that protect us as homeowners and people who currently live in the village, then it's a good thing with a time limit to give us the rules and regulations that will protect us, protect the people who are here to visit us, and make sure that everything is being done in the correct way. And if I'm correct, again, I don't know if I am, I think, Kim, that your Airbnb is being used as a top-notch example of how an Airbnb should be run. The guidelines are going to be based around how you run your business, and that's amazing. Like, kudos to you for being so, transparent with your neighbors, friendly, making sure that if there are any concerns, you take care of it. And I think that's why there haven't been complaints, because it's you are there. And now I can't speak to any other short-term rentals because I don't really know you, but I know how dedicated you are to that. I also just don't want to see investors coming into our very, as one of my friends says, hallmark village, and buying up properties just to rent them and not care about the community we're in. Making sure that you're not paying double the value of a home so that your neighbor's property goes so high that they can't pay their taxes anymore. That's going to increase property values. And that's for me too. Like, I live in the village. That's scary for me. I have a very young family, and to say we are financially stable is not exactly true. Like, we have to make sure that we're going to make ends meet at the end of every month. So for me, I can see both sides, and I just want to say that I hope that everyone has the best intentions and that we can stop making this political and
this side against that side, and he said, she said, because I hear all of these things, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is not what it should be about. It should be about protecting all of us, whether you're a short-term rental owner or you are a village resident. Thank you.
Can I speak? I'm new to Cassadaga. Yay! I bought a house from Ray Haynes. Oh, I'm sorry, Deborah Metzger, 134 Maple Avenue. Speaking to this gentleman that just spoke recently, I forget your name?
Tom Beekner.
Tom
Beekner.
Beekner?
Yes.
Hi, Tom. There was a statement made that people can't afford to live in Cassadaga. I bought a house for $86,000. There are affordable houses in Cassadaga. And it was just last year. It's not even been a year yet. So there are affordable houses. I ran an Airbnb in Silver Creek. I lived there for 31 years, and I saw that beautiful little village of Silver Creek go downhill more and more and more. And I saw it happen, and as I started observing it, I realized it started happening because of all the long-term rentals. Nobody even addresses that here. Long-term rentals can be an absolute nightmare. My sister had to sell a long-term rental last year because the government said that people didn't have to pay their rent. And she couldn't pay her bills. She called the village. They said, you have to pay your taxes, you have to pay your water bill. She said, they won't pay the rent, and I can't do anything about it. So I think we need to just take a pause back. Everybody is coming for, I've talked to neighbors who are very much against it. I love my neighbors. I want everybody to be heard, and I think there's a place if it's done right, and it isn't just even Kim, although Kim gets a lot of credit. Airbnb is very strict. I had a very large man who apparently I didn't wait on hand and foot and didn't give me a good recommendation because of it. There are people out there. We are under Airbnb. If you want to run a viable business, you better be top-notch, regardless of the village law. They're very strict. And people pay attention to that. If you have less than 5 stars, they don't want to go to your facility. You have to keep your place updated. You have to keep it improved. You have to keep the yard clean. When I was in, like I said, I've been in Silver Creek for so long, I see moms and pops get older, the spouse passes, one of them can't afford the property anymore, it gets run down, it goes for back taxes, or it gets sold cheap. Somebody comes in there for long-term rentals, rents it out. I mean, we have people on crack and dope and all kinds of stuff around there. It's terrible.
Okay.
And then